Hello dolls, and welcome back to another video. Today I want to talk about one of my all-time favorite designers. He is so much intertwined with so much of the 1960s swinging London scene. He shaped so much of King's Road and that fashion scene in general, but I feel like he's nowadays often forgotten about because he only worked for a little over 10 years. So today I want to tell you everything about the incredible Ossie Clark. I've been wanting to make a video on him for such a long time now. It took me a while to get all the information and everything together because there isn't too much out there about him. There are a couple of books available, but as always, I will have all the sources linked down below. But his fashion and his love story with Celia Birtwell, which was so much intertwined with their work and their personal life, has always fascinated me deeply, as well as the tragic turn that his life took. And so today, I would like to introduce you to the King of King's Road, Ossie Clark. One more thing before we get into it. The audio in my videos has been bothering me for a while. There's a huge street down there. There's nothing I can do about it. It's just loud. So I'm trying to move the mic closer to my face. Usually I don't like to have it in frame, but I'm trying it today to just see how it works. But leave a comment down below telling me what you think about this. But yeah, let's get into the life story of the one and only Ossie Clark. Ossie Clark was a magician with fabric, a dreamer who stitched movement into every seam. To wear one of his creations was to dance through life, weightless, draped in something that felt as effortless as a second skin. He wasn't just a designer, he was an architect of style, sculpting silk and moss crepe to hug the body in ways that felt both sensual and free. By the late 1960s, he was crowned the King of King's Road, his name whispered through London's fashion scene like a secret spell. Alongside Celia Birtwell, whose whimsical prints gave his designs their soul, Ossie dressed the icons of the era. Mick, Jagger, the Beatles, Marianne, Faithfull, turning their every step into a statement. His world was one of music, movement, and unfiltered creativity, but it was also a world of excess where beauty and chaos walked hand in hand. On August 6, 1996, a young man with an Italian accent walked into a London police station and confessed, "I think I've killed someone." When authorities arrived at a modest council flat in Holland Park, they found the lifeless body of a 54-year-old man. He had been stabbed 37 times and his skull had been shattered with a terracotta pot. The crime scene suggested a chaotic and desperate existence: patterned paper instead of carpets, empty booze bottles, and makeshift goldfish tanks. The victim was Raymond Ossie Clark, once one of Britain's most influential designers. It was a tragic end for a man who had revolutionized fashion like none other and who at this point had been largely forgotten about. Born in Liverpool in 1942, Raymond Clark earned his famous nickname thanks to the Lancashire village Oswald Twizzle, I hope I said that right, where his family was evacuated to during World War II. Because he never really liked the name Raymond, he would soon be known as Ossie Clark. I listened to a podcast called Mother Macabre, where the host said that Ossie's mom was expecting a girl, and so when Ossie was born, she was very overwhelmed and she didn't really know which name to choose, and so the midwife was the one who ended up choosing Raymond as a name for him. It's interesting because Wikipedia did mention that too, and from my understanding, in the 1940s, there was no way to tell a baby's gender before birth, so I'm assuming that she was just going off of her gut feeling. Or this is just simply another myth and legend in the life of Ossie Clark. This is something that you will be confronted with when you look into Ossie Clark's life. There are so many myths and legends, and for some parts of the story, it is really hard to determine what actually happened. I, as always, have all my sources down below. I try to find at least 2 sources for everything that I'm telling you today to just make sure that these things are solid, but there still is a chance that some of the things that I'm telling you are just legends about him that are widely believed. Because he died so young, there's really no way of actually finding out about a lot of things. From an early age, Ossie had a knack for creating. Family and friends recalled how he could turn his hand to everything, designing clothes for his nieces and nephews and practicing tailoring on dolls before he was even 10 years old. He made swimsuits for the neighborhood girls, where he got completely absorbed in the act of dressing the body. His secondary art school teacher, a man by the name of Roy Thomas, saw his potential and encouraged him with a stack of Vogue and Harper's Bazaar's magazines. Ossie devoured them, studying every detail of high fashion and absorbing the glamour of it all. School was never Ossie's strong suit, except for geometry, which was always his best subject. He had a natural grasp of the mathematical principles behind fashion, something that would become a hallmark of his work. It makes a lot of sense that he admired designers like Madeleine Vionnet and Charles James, which are both known for their technical brilliance. His interest in proportions, height, and volume was further sharpened when he studied architecture at Warrington Technical College at just 13 years old. It is often said that Ossie only needed to touch a woman's body once to understand and know her proportions. He often worked without a pattern, simply taking scissors to the fabric and cutting it, allowing him to create these incredibly beautiful and flowing silhouettes that he would soon be known for. Despite his technical mind, Ossie was also drawn to glamour. When he was reading through these Harper's Bazaar and Vogue magazines that his art teacher gave him, he was introduced to Diana Freeland. Diana Freeland was the editor-in-chief for Vogue USA from 1963 to 1971. She shaped many fashion trends in the US and inspired many up-and-coming designers. I spoke about her briefly in my videos about black models, because when David Bailey wanted to shoot Danielle Luna for the US Vogue, she was strongly against it, but it is safe to say that she was a master of her craft and she shaped most of 1960s and 70s fashion trends in America. Inspired by the fashion that he saw and the emerging youth movement in London, he pursued fashion seriously, enrolling at Manchester Regional College of Art in 1957. He was only 16 years old at the time and the only male student in the entire course. While studying in Manchester, he was introduced to Celia Birtwell by their mutual friend Mo McDermott. At first, they were just close friends, but it soon blossomed into a love affair. Celia would become his muse, collaborator, and wife. I would love to make a video all about Celia Birtwell one day. I'll talk about her a lot in this video, but maybe one day I will dedicate her own video. She is still alive, she is still going and making incredible patterns and fabrics, and there's something so special about her. And I cannot encourage you enough to look her up and look at her speaking and the way that she carries herself, because there is something so timeless and wonderful about her and the way that she just speaks about these times in Ossie. Around the same time, Ossie struck up a friendship with David Hockney. Yes, the legendary artist David Hockney. The two of them took an eye-opening trip to New York City while still in college, meeting key figures in the art and fashion world. Their friendship, which was often speculated to have been more than just friendship, was as creative as it was volatile. Ossie truly excelled in the technical aspects of fashion, cutting, tailoring, and pattern construction, which became the foundation of his distinctive style. Because he was able to free himself from the classic approach to dressmaking by just cutting the fabric and making the patterns afterwards, he revolutionized the way fashion was made and perceived in the mid-1960s. His abilities earned him a scholarship to London's Royal College of Art in 1962, where he studied under the legendary professor Jamie Ironside. He graduated in 1965 with a first-class degree from the Royal College of Art in London. His graduation show featured an op art-inspired collection that was even featured in British Vogue. His final collection at the RCA was nothing short of spectacle. One of his dresses, adorned with flashing light bulbs, caught the eye of every person in the room. As said, British Vogue was there and they ran a feature on him, marking his arrival into the fashion industry in a spectacular fashion. The very next day, newspapers and magazines were already discussing his work, and from that moment on, Ossie Clark was truly unstoppable. At only 23, Ossie had already caught the eye of the fashion world and made a name for himself. Fresh out of college, he was taken on as a co-designer at Quorum, an exclusive boutique on King's Road ran by Alice Pollock. Partnering with Alex, Ossie introduced a new vision for women's fashion. While the mid-1960s had been dominated by the youthful minimalism of mod style, sharp geometric cuts, clean lines, and futuristic fabrics, Ossie went in the completely opposite direction. His designs were fluid, romantic, and sensuous. He revived the bias cut, creating garments that draped beautifully over the body, and his dresses featured deep necklines, fluttering ruffles, and cinched waists. Unlike many designers of the time, he didn't just cater to one body type. His designs flattered women of all shapes and sizes. Ossie's dresses were purely luxury, designed to fit like a second skin, moving with the body rather than restricting it. Underwear, not necessary. His signature bias-cut gowns in chiffon, silk, satin, crepe, and soft jersey draped effortlessly, skimming every curve. Plunging necklines, elegant scoop necks, and ethereal trumpet sleeves defined his silhouettes. Many of his pieces were held together with delicate wraparound ties, ribbons, or rows of tiny covered buttons, adding to their sensuality. His color palette was just as dreamy. Creamy ivories, deep moss greens, rich surreys, scarlet and inky black, alongside more unexpected hues like prune, dead rose, and saffron. It is one of my biggest dreams to one day own an Ossie Clark dress. Today I'm wearing this dress, which is very much inspired by Ossie Clark. It also does have the plunging neckline. It just has like a tie detail that kind of like covers it a little. Does have a lot of the patterns. However, I'm going to show you hundreds of pictures in this video of Ossie Clark's clothes, and they are one of a kind. They are so truly beautiful. They go at auctions from about $5,000 to like $10,000. And I swear one day I will get an Ossie Clark dress. Celia Birtwell has actually revived some of the styles for Joni clothing, I believe, and you can get some of these like reproduction pieces. But I would love to get an original Ossie Clark piece, not an Ossie Clark by Radley piece, because these are much more common. I'll talk about what that means later. But to one day own an original Ossie Clark piece would be an absolute dream come true. Soon, Ossie fully immersed himself into the creative world. Music, fashion, and art were everything to him. He bought 6 new records every single week, always keeping up with the latest sounds. But it was also during this time that his indulgence in hard drugs became more frequent. Quote, "This is when his character began to change," said longtime friend Lady Henrietta Roos. The turning point came less than a year later, in 1966, when Celia Birtwell was commissioned to create prints that complemented Ossie's designs. Although it initially was Alice who wanted Celia to design some patterns for the shop, it ended up being the perfect love affair with Ossie's dresses, and the pieces that he is now so widely known for are the pieces that the two of them created together. Celia's swirling Art Nouveau and Art Deco inspired botanicals, often featuring birds and flowers, added a dreamlike, nostalgic quality to Ossie's already enchanting silhouettes. This collaboration became the heart of his aesthetic, merging historical nostalgia with contemporary bohemianism. Their work was so intertwined that Ossie Clark and Celia Birtwell became a single entity in the fashion world. Celia Birtwell's prints brought another layer of magic. Romantic florals, floating hearts, and wispy feathers inspired by everything, from illuminated manuscripts to Matisse, Picasso, and the Ballet Russe. Even the bold Egyptian motifs seemed to flow seamlessly over the body, making each dress feel like a living work of art. By 1966, Vogue had featured his work, and his pieces were being sold at Woodlands 21, one of the most fashionable shops in London. Soon his clientele grew to include some of the most stylish and influential women of the era. Bianca Jagger, Jane Birkin, Patty Boyd, Marianne Faithfull, Charlotte Rampling, and Ally McGraw were all devoted to his design. His influence even extended to rock stars. Mick Jagger and Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones wore Ossie Clark, as did Peter Gabriel of Genesis, who borrowed a red Ossie Clark dress from his wife Jill and wore it with a fox's head for the cover of Genesis' Foxtrot album. Ossie's long-running collaboration with the Rolling Stones began in the most effortless way. One day Mick Jagger wandered into Quorum, and the connection was instant. Before long, Mick was in Ossie's flat, twirling around the room as Ossie sketched, capturing every moment in fabric. Long before Lycra took the stage, Ossie dreamed up the perfect solution for Mick's performances. Sleek, form-fitting jumpsuits that moved with him, and, much to his road manager's delight, could just be tossed in the wash after every show. Though he had a knack for leather and snakeskin, pioneering trends like the motorcycle jacket, leather hot pants, and sweeping maxi coats, his true magic laid in the way he handled fabric. Crepe, satin, silk, chiffon, all materials that most designers found temperamental, seemed to become fluid under his hands, draping the body like something out of a dream. Liza Minnelli performed Maybe This Time in Cabaret wearing one of his dresses, and Sharon Tate's snakeskin coat, one of the most iconic fashion pieces of the era, was an Ossie Clark creation. It is said that one day Ossie found stacks of old snakeskin in a warehouse where they had been stored away for over 20 years. He bought them for only a few pounds since the owner deemed them worthless. Snakeskin hadn't been in style for ages, but Ossie's collection would bring them back into the spotlight of fashion, with the most popular wearer being the one and only Sharon Tate. This style is so iconic that it's not only been recreated over and over again since then, it was also immortalized in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where Margot Robbie portraying Sharon Tate wears exactly that coat. The fashion press dubbed Ossie the King of King's Road. Ossie pronounced himself a, quote, master cutter. It's all in my brain and fingers, and there's no one in the world to touch me. I can do everything myself. His great idol was the famous dancer Nijinsky, and his love of dance inspired his clothes to be free-moving and not to restrict the female form. As mentioned, Ossie's freehand cutting techniques were legendary. He often cut fabric directly without measuring, an instinctual method that made his garments feel organic, as if they had been simply draped over the wearer. His pieces even had hidden pockets, just large enough to hold a key and a $5 bill, which Ossie believed was all a liberated woman really needed. At the height of his success, Ossie was rubbing shoulders with Diana Vreeland, Andy Warhol, and Truman Capote. His work was celebrated internationally, and New York's Henry Bendel even dedicated an entire department to his and Celia Birtwell's designs. He was hailed as the British equivalent of Yves Saint Laurent, a master of cut and drape, someone who understood how to make a woman feel beautiful, glamorous, and effortlessly chic. Yves Saint Laurent often named Ossie as one of his biggest inspirations. Ossie and Celia's relationship was as deeply woven into their creative work as it was in their personal life. And I truly believe that one couldn't have been happening without the other one. So let's take a look at this extraordinary partnership. It was a partnership born out of art, fashion, and an undeniable chemistry that fueled some of the most beautiful garments of the late 1960s and early 1970s. They had met as teenagers at the Regional College of Art in Manchester, two young students with boundless talent and ambition. Celia was a quiet but determined textile designer with a love for historical prints and delicate patterns. Ossie, in contrast, was full of energy, charismatic, confident, and already showing signs of the genius that would later earn him the title, the King of King's Road. They were drawn to each other almost instantly, their connection blossoming into a romance that would define both their careers. After college, they had moved to London, where the fashion scene was exploding with new ideas and young designers were eager to revolutionize the industry. It was an era of reinvention where traditions were challenged in every turn, and Ossie and Celia were at the heart of it all. They lived together in Notting Hill, sharing not just a home but a world of inspiration. Their love spilled into their work. Celia's intricate, hand-drawn prints became the perfect complement to Ossie's fluid designs. Together, they created a look that was unmistakably theirs, romantic yet modern, structured yet free-flowing. Ossie actually learned most of his sewing skills from Celia's mom. She was a seamstress and worked at a store where they mostly made wedding dresses, and she had all these incredible sewing skills that she passed down right to Ossie. Celia said that she never learned how to sew clothes and that she wasn't really interested in all of that. She was very much interested in graphics and just designing prints, and that was it. She wasn't really interested in constructing clothes. But she often said how Ossie would have been a fantastic architect too. She loved the way that he constructed clothes, and so did everyone else. Their relationship was filled with passion, but like many great creative duos, it was also quite tumultuous. Ossie's personality was magnetic but unpredictable. He thrived in the hedonistic world of late 1960s London, where parties, drugs, and rock stars were an everyday occurrence. He was adored, constantly surrounded by models, musicians, and artists who basked his brilliance. But Celia, while deeply in love with him, was never fully comfortable with his excess. She preferred quiet creativity to chaotic nightlife. Her focus was always on her work and her family. I found this wonderful interview from when Celia was a guest on Creative Conversation hosted by Susie Menkes in 2022. You can listen to the full episode on Spotify, and it is, as always, linked in the description box with all the other sources, and I would highly encourage you to listen to it. It is only 30 minutes long, but Celia's love for patterns, clothes, and Ossie can be felt in every second.
Or were you just individual people who loved each other or had fun with each other, and something was born from that?
I certainly loved him. I thought he was an amazing character. He wasn't really for me, but I absolutely loved his talent. I liked his style. What I didn't like, but in fact I did like to a degree, was he was a party person. He wanted to be a pop star. The whole movement at the time was music. Music was a dominant force. Cottage industries were popping up everywhere. Little boutiques were popping up. And although there'd been possibly a strong look from Vidal Sassoon hairstyles that I could never do because I've always had rubbish hair, there were certain looks that people followed. But I think he brought a relaxed vision of fashion. We didn't have to wear bras as much. We weren't as controlled as much. And his style and his amazing cut, which nobody has been able to do since him for me, relaxed everything and became easier to dance in and have a lot of fun, I think. But then we were all young, so people do have fun, hopefully, when they're young.
Despite their differences, they got married in 1969 after Celia found out she was pregnant. They had already been together for 8 years at this point. David Hockney was their best man, and Celia would go on to also become a muse of him. Their wedding was a glamorous affair, a gathering of the who's who of London's creative elite. In one of David's most iconic paintings, titled Mr. and Mrs. Clark and Percy, he immortalized them alongside their cat as the effortlessly cool couple they were, exuding the kind of relaxed elegance that they brought to their work.
The painting is so close to me. It's like part of me. I've seen it ever since it was painted, and people talk to me about it a lot. And I think it's brilliant of Ossie. I think he struggled with Ossie's face, and he got him very cleverly. And when we did the exhibition in Warrington many moons ago, we actually borrowed the painting, which I was very impressed with. And we even got a taxidermy to give us a white cat called Blanche, although he called it Percy. And they got the dress that I wore on a mannequin and the cat sitting at the side, which was a very nice touch. And I got to know that painting quite well then. It's just part of my life. I mean, it's just always been there. People always ask me about it. All my members of the family have got a poster on the wall of it. It's the most interesting... Well, it's the most influential postcard, I think, the Tate has got.
For a time, their life together was magic. They had 2 sons and their careers soared. Ossie's designs were worn by the biggest names of the era, while Celia's prints became instantly recognizable, decorating flowing chiffon gowns and dramatic trouser suits. They balanced each other. Her quiet stability grounded his wild imagination. But cracks began to show. Ossie's extravagant spending habits and increasing drug use put a strain on their marriage. He was generous to a fault, often giving away clothes to friends rather than selling them, and he struggled with the business side of fashion. This is something that I will come back to later, but it is important to know that during all of this time, Celia was completely dependent on Ossie. He was the one who used her patterns, and he was the one who was kind of responsible for making the money. And the truth is, he just couldn't handle business as well. Ossie's affair with both men and women became more frequent. And even though Celia loved him, the weight of his lifestyle became too much to bear. I will come back to this later as well, but Ossie's love life has been talked much about. A lot of people believe that he was actually gay and that he just ended up marrying Celia because they liked each other. She was there to support all his dreams, to deal with him going out every night and partying. And then that was the reason why they ended up getting married, because they believed that he was actually gay, because there definitely was a point in his life from which on he only dated men. But I don't believe that. I think he was most likely bisexual. It is really hard to speculate about someone's sexuality, but I just want to say that I believe that he truly loved Celia. From the way that all of this came to be, the way that they were working together and living together, the way that Celia talks about him. just makes me believe that these two had nothing but love for each other. And also by the way that they speak and spoke about each other. Even Celia, the way that she speaks about him after everything that happened and after all these years, makes me believe that they truly loved each other. In 1974, the inevitable happened. Their marriage ended. Celia, though heartbroken, knew she had to stay away. Their love had burned bright, but it could not withstand Ossie's self-destructive tendencies. Though they divorced, they remained connected in many ways. Celia continued her work in textiles. However, for the next 10 years, her focus would fully shift to interior design, while Ossie's career took a downward turn. He just never truly recovered from their split. He adored Celia, and losing her left a void that he struggled to fill. I honestly don't know if it was the struggle of losing Celia or whether it was the struggle of losing all structure that he had in his life. Celia and their 2 sons put so much structure into his life, and after that was gone, he was just all alone and he didn't know how to cope. And I do believe that it was the connection of both of these things. But this is a very dark and sad turning point in Ossie's life, because from here on it would only go downward. But even in his darkest, Ossie spoke of Celia with so much affection, and Celia, despite everything that had happened, always acknowledged Ossie's genius. She understood him better than most, and she recognized that his brilliance was inseparable from his chaos. Though the love story didn't have a fairy tale ending, what they created together, both in fashion and in life, was unforgettable. Their designs remain a testament to a time when love and art were indistinguishable, when a dress was more than just fabric, but a story, a movement, a memory. And for Ossie and Celia, their story remains one of the most beautiful and bittersweet romances in fashion history. As mentioned earlier, despite his artistic genius, Ossie was never much of a businessman. He was generous to a fault, often giving away designs rather than selling them. In the podcast I spoke about earlier, Celia explained how back then they didn't care for money. There was always enough money to make it, and they never bothered to get a better deal or raise the prices of their designs. But while Ossie and his business partner Alice had an unmatched ability to attract the rich and famous, they struggled to manage the business itself immensely. Dresses disappeared, handed out to celebrities, or simply lost. By 1967, their boutique Quorum was drowning in debt. A financial backer, Mike Armitage, decided to cut losses, and Quorum was sold to Alfred Radley's fashion house. Unlike others, Radley saw Ossie's genius and kept him on board, funding large-scale fashion shows and introducing the Ossie Clark for Radley line, which made his designs more accessible. This is what I meant earlier. The Ossie Clark by Radley pieces are way easier to get because they just produced so much more of that. Ossie's first major show for Radley in 1967 was a game changer. Held at Chelsea Town Hall and filmed by Pathé News, it was one of the first British fashion shows to feature black models, shaking up the industry standards. Although the collaboration with Radley worked for a while, his magic couldn't be fully replicated. This is the phenomenon I talked about in my Biba video before. I'm gonna link that here. In the late 1960s, many of these boutiques and up-and-coming brands were bought out by major companies, and most of the time failed quite soon afterwards. These large shops were never able to capture the magic of the small boutiques that these stores once were. By the late 1970s, fashion had shifted. Punk took over, and designers like Vivienne Westwood were defining a new rebellious aesthetic. Ossie, unwilling or unable to adapt, found himself left behind. He made a brief comeback in 1977, partnering with Tony Calder and Peter Lee. For 2 years, he was back in the spotlight, staging dazzling fashion shows that were met with rave reviews. Fashion writer Anne Chubb declared, quote, "It is great to see him right back on form again after a few years in the doldrums." But those 2 years were short-lived. In 1983, he had declared bankruptcy and lost his home. The man who had once dressed rock stars and Hollywood icons was now living in government housing, relying on welfare. There are many accounts from the mid-80s to about the mid-1990s of people who said that they saw him in the streets of London, searching the bins for food and drugs. A brief collaboration with the brand Ghost in the mid-1980s led to a short-lived revival, but by then the industry had largely moved on. Before we get into the tragic final part of Ossie's life, I would like to talk about another theory on his downfall that came to me while writing this video. It is a well-known phenomenon. Artists who enter the industry young and on a high wave eventually end up having the hardest downfalls. I always thought it must be the combination of having everything you could wish for so incredibly young and being known as a master of your craft right from the start. Ossie was only 23 when his first collection was widely featured and praised. He fully immersed himself into the fashion industry, and for a little over 10 years, he was one of the biggest designers in London. He very much bridged the swinging 60s from Mary Quant to the rebellious late 1970s, marked by Vivienne Westwood's designs. His fashion was everything anyone could wish for, but only for a short period. Ossie never learned to adapt to a regular life. Fresh out of school, he was rubbing shoulders with the most popular faces of London and all of the world. How could he have ever topped this? He is also one of many 1960s geniuses who fell victim to the drug-fueled scene of the time. I feel like there is this certain point in the late 60s going into the 70s where many rock stars and popular people of the 60s and 70s started to take significantly less drugs, but some of them were already so deep into the scene and into their addiction that they couldn't recover, and that it was just a downward road for them from there on. And Ossie, who was so brilliant, had his life taken over by addiction as his career crumbled. What was left was only the shell of the man Ossie Clark had once been. That is my theory, that alongside the fact that he was always kind of overindulging in things, and Celia was the only one to kind of keep him a little safe from himself almost. It's something that I spoke about in the podcast episode about Janis Joplin. I'm just gonna link that down below as well, where Janis Joplin really early on realized that she could have a very regular life, but then she couldn't make any music, because if she wanted to make music, and that is what she truly felt like she wanted to do, she could only do it with the combination of taking drugs, because she knew in that music scene she could never get sober. And so she decided to follow her path and her dream of becoming a musician, even though she knew it was going to kill her young. And I feel like it was such a combination of so many things, and I would love to get your opinion in the comments, but I do believe that it was the combination of drugs, being such a master at his craft so early on, being around the people that he was around with, and losing Celia. And I also believe that when he lost his brand, he lost such a big part of his life. He had worked for this pretty much all of his life, and he lost it in the wink of an eye. And I feel like the void that left, alongside with the void that Celia left, couldn't be filled for him in any other way than taking drugs. I don't think that he thought he was able to get out of this. By the 1990s, Ossie had fell into obscurity. He spent his days wandering the streets and pubs of West London, a far cry from the glamorous world he had once ruled. It was during this time that he met Diego Cogolado, a troubled young man with a history of drug use. Ossie invited him to live with him, and their relationship was volatile. Many of his friends actually advised Ossie against taking in Diego. He was an addict just like Ossie, and Ossie had invited him to live with him the day that he met him. Ossie was living in a council flat, and Diego, who was already struggling with his mental health, took up the offer and moved in. On a tragic night in early August of 1966, Diego, high on drugs and in a paranoid state, attacked Ossie, believing him to be the devil. He stabbed him 27 times and broke his skull with a terracotta pot. At only 54 years old, Ossie Clark was dead. The brutal murder shocked the fashion world and all those who were once in his inner circle. For the first time in years, newspapers like the New York Times published tributes to his work. His name, once nearly forgotten, was suddenly on everyone's lips again. In 1997, Diego Congolado was found guilty of manslaughter, but they only gave him 6 years in prison due to his mental state. Passing the sentence, the judge said, quote, "You killed your friend in a frenzied attack while you were in a psychotic state, which may have been brought on by a combination of drugs, both prescribed and illicit." His tragic death reignited an interest in his designs. In 1998, his diaries were published, offering a glimpse into his tumultuous life and mind. In 2003, the Victoria and Albert Museum hosted a retrospective of his work, and in 2012, he and Celia Birtwell were honored with a Royal Mail postage stamp as part of a tribute to the greatest British fashion designers. In the end, his story is one of brilliance, tragedy, and rediscovery. Ossie lived for beauty, for movement, for the rush of inspiration that turned fabric into something alive. He poured himself into his work, shaping an era with his dreamlike designs, dressing the muses and rock gods of the time, only to watch it all slip away. His love for excess, for hedonism, for the euphoria of the moment burned bright, sometimes too bright. But fashion, like history, has a way of circling back, and today his work is revered as the masterpiece it always was. The whisper of silk, the fluid drape of a biased cut, the romance in every stitch. His legacy is stitched into the seams of fashion itself. He was a true visionary, ahead of his time, whose genius was recognized too late, but never forgotten. So that is it for today's video. That is it for my thoughts, feelings, and take on Ossie Clark's life. I have always felt so dearly for him because he is now reduced so often to the fashion designer who was killed in this like weird way. I feel like a lot of times that people now talk about Ossie Clark, they just talk about his downfall and his tragic death. But what he should be known for is his clothes. It should be his fashion, his designs, and the way that he shaped fashion in the 60s and 70s. It is so interesting because when you look at Ossie Clark designs from the late 60s, these are the styles that were so wildly popular in the 70s. The flowing sleeves, the wide-legged pants, all of that became so phenomenally groundbreaking in the 70s. And he was there doing that 5 to 10 years before everyone else. And it is so truly heartbreaking that his life took the turn that it did. And it is so truly heartbreaking that he never got the happy ever after that he probably deserved. I feel so deeply for him, and I don't know why he was never able to recover, why he was never able to get back on track, because he certainly tried several times. And the interesting fact about Ossie Clark is that even when he had his comeback in the late 70s, everyone loved him. Everyone, all these years later, still adored his designs, but he had such a destructive way about himself that he could never live up to the career that he probably could have been had. Which, I don't want to say that he didn't have an incredible career. I just feel like if it wasn't for him, he might have had this long and wonderful life and career. And I can't help but wonder whether him and Celia would have reconciled one day. When I hear her speak about him, she has so much love for him, and she speaks so fondly of him that I truly believe that there might have been a chance. But yeah, that was it. That was the extraordinary life and tragic life of Ossie Clark. I would love you to leave a comment down below telling me what you think about all of this, and if you enjoyed the video, I would love you to give it a thumbs up and maybe subscribe, maybe stick around. I make tons of videos all about the 60s and 70s, and yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you have a beautiful day. Go out, enjoy the sunshine, take yourself some time to focus on you and your mental health today, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye, dolls!